For 42 years, the official record said Henri Cornet won the 1904 Tour de France clean, the youngest champion the race has ever crowned. That's the story they tell. It isn't what happened. Henri Desgrange, the man who built the Tour de France, made sure you'd never learn what his own investigators found that winter. Someone decided this needed to stay buried. Here's what the records were rewritten to hide. The Tour de France was only a year old in 1904. It almost didn't survive a second edition. Maurice Garin had won the first race in 1903, a hero to the crowds. By 1904, that adoration had curdled into regional rage. Fans in the mountains hated riders from rival towns. Garin crossed the finish line first again, nearly 6 hours ahead of the field. The crowds cheered. The newspapers printed his name as champion. For a few months, that's exactly what he was. Then quietly in December, the French Cycling Federation opened its books. What they found didn't fit the story anyone wanted told. Garin and 3 other top finishers hadn't ridden the whole route. Witnesses placed them on trains. Spectators reported cars towing riders up mountain passes, out of sight of officials. Nails had been scattered across roads to sabotage rivals. In one town, a mob beat a cyclist nearly unconscious for representing the wrong region. The Federation disqualified Garin. They disqualified the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place finishers too. Henri Cornet, 19 years old, who'd crossed the line in 5th, was declared the winner. He became the youngest champion in the race's history. That part is true. What's not true is that this was the whole investigation, or that it ended there. Here's the crack in the official version. The Federation's ruling was 1 paragraph. 4 names stripped of their titles, no public explanation beyond irregularities. But the investigators had compiled something much longer: statements from towns along the route, timing discrepancies for nearly a dozen riders, not 4. Officials in at least 2 other regions had also been paid to look away from local favorites. If the full report had gone public, it wouldn't have just disqualified 4 men. It would have called the entire result of the race into question. Cornet's win, the one still sitting in the record books today, sat on evidence just as shaky as Garin's. You'd expect a young sport desperate for legitimacy to publish everything and start clean. That's the obvious move. It isn't what happened. Desgrange had every reason to bury the fuller report instead of releasing it. He'd nearly canceled the tour outright after the 1904 chaos, telling a Paris newspaper the race was finished, that its own violence and fraud had killed it. A full accounting of just how compromised the results were wouldn't have saved the tour. It would have ended it before it turned 3. So the complete file went into the Federation's private archive instead of the public record. Officially, cycling moved on. Unofficially, the men who ran it knew exactly how thin the finish line result actually was. The deeper truth is what Desgrange did next, and it's the part that never made it into any cycling history until decades later. He didn't just suppress the findings. He rebuilt the entire format of the tour around making sure it could never happen again: smaller stages, closer official surveillance, checkpoints riders couldn't fake their way past. On paper, that looks like reform. But reform announced without ever admitting what it was reforming. Desgrange let the public believe 1904 was a minor scandal involving 4 cheaters, quietly punished, quickly forgotten. The Federation's full file, the one naming a dozen riders and at least 2 compromised regional officials, stayed sealed. It didn't surface until 1946, when a Federation archivist cataloging old records for a post-war history project found it undisturbed in a storage box. 42 years after it was written. By then, everyone named in it was dead or long retired, and the sport had spent 4 decades building its legend on the clean version. The 1946 discovery barely made news. A short mention in a French sporting journal, no follow-up, no correction to the record books. Cornet is still listed as the 1904 champion. Garin's disqualification is still framed as an isolated case of one greedy man. What it actually cost was the truth about how fragile the tour's founding legend really was, and how many people, not just 4, understood the rules were optional if you knew who to pay. Fans who spent generations idolizing the sport's earliest era never got to know that its first real crisis was managed with a cover-up, not a cleanup. The 1946 file has since vanished from where the archivist said he left it. No library, no Federation archive, no private collector has produced it since. So the question isn't just what it said. It's who decided, a second time, that this story needed to disappear again.